Hi everybody, it's Miss Olivia here from the Children's Room. I'm making a recommendation book talk video today, but before we begin, I want to explain why. I'm going to use I statements while I make this video because I'm speaking from my perspective and my experience, which is a white woman. I've been watching and reading the news all week, and I wanted to use my knowledge and resources to support the protest and support the Black Lives Matter movement. As a librarian, I work to put information into the hands of our patrons, into all of your hands. As a white librarian in a historically white profession, I work to uplift by and recommend books by and about Black people, Indigenous peoples, and people of color. With that in mind, I decided to make this recommendation video for books to all of you, specifically about and in support of the protests and the Black Lives Matter movement. I'm going to quickly speak to my own experience and say that as a white woman who grew up in a racially divided part of the country, I have spent my entire adult life learning to be anti-racist. One way I do that is by reading. The books that I recommend to you here are going to be, to use Rudine Sims Bishop's words, they're either going to be mirrors for validating some of your anger and frustration, or they're going to be windows to look into and understand different perspectives or the lives of Black people living in the United States currently. This depends on your identity, your perspective, what you've gone through in life. So my recommendations are in no way meant for every single person. One work that will work for me will not work for the next person, and that's okay. Hopefully this list is long enough and big enough that you can try different books and see what works for you. One way to support the protests and movements that are currently taking place is to listen. If you're angry, if you're overwhelmed, if you don't understand, please just listen to the protesters and listen to people who are speaking about the injustices they have faced. Reading is a form of listening. And so these are some books that you can read and support to understand. Most of these books are available on Libby or Hoopla. If not, we're working to buy them. They are also available in print form, so you can request them whenever we reopen or whenever we start curbside pickup. I also recommend supporting a local business and buying from White Lamb Books if you can. If not, you can read these books online or when we reopen, hopefully later. So here are some recommendations. The first group of books I am going to recommend are picture books. So the first one is A is for Activists by Inosanto Negara. This is a great introduction for kids about injustice and protesting. It's a book that causes conversation. So I recommend this book to people who are ready to have that conversation because the illustrations and the vocab are very upper level and kids will have a lot of questions. I Too Am America by Langston Hughes and illustrated by Brian Collier. And also Hey Black Child by Useni Eugene Perkins and illustrated by Brian Collier are two picture books with beautiful illustrations that feature positive affirmations for Black children. I recommend these two books to those that need those positive affirmations in their life. Also for those people who want to show non-Black children that Black children are America, are beautiful, they do matter. The Undefeated by Kwame Alexander and illustrated by Kadir Nelson won the Caldecott this year, and I recommend this book for anyone who wants to give their littles a lesson in history and resilience of people in the face of oppression. The next book is Hands Up by Briana Mcdaniel and illustrated by Shane Evans. And this book is, of course, about the protest chant, Hands Up, Don't Shoot. But Briana Mcdaniel wanted to, in her author's note at the end, she wrote that she wanted to quote her, quote, to emphasize the ways I've experienced that phrase as part of my everyday life at home, at play, in church, and at protests. So it's a both and book. It's a book that looks at the joy of being a Black child while also looking at their experience in having to fight for their right to be a Black child in America. It's a great book for littles who need to understand that experience, or for littles who want to validate and see themselves in that experience. Finally, the last two books I recommend are picture books for grown-ups who feel very heavy and very sensitive by the news, and their children are affected by that. Come With Me by Holly McGee, illustrated by Pascal Lemaitre, and Breaking News by Sarah Lynn Rule are two books that discuss kids feeling out of sorts when a lot is happening on the news and when their parents are upset by the news. And the kids and the parents the kids and the grown-ups, I should say, the kids and the grown-ups come together and learn what families can do in small acts to be advocates and to be allies. The next group of books I'm going to discuss are middle grade novels. A Good Kind of Trouble by Lisa Moira-May is a book about a main character who's trying to find her voice within the Black Lives Matter movement. It's a great tool for children who want to understand activism or who are trying to find their voice within the movement. New Kid by Jerry Craft is a graphic novel that won the Newbery this year, and I would recommend this book as both a mirror and a window. So the book is about a Black main character who is one of only a few Black students in a predominantly white school, and he faces microaggressions, discrimination, and the trials of being a middle schooler. I would especially recommend this to non-Black readers who can see a perspective that they will never be able to understand or witness because they are not Black. In that same recommendation, I also recommend The Only Black Girls in Town by Brandi Colbert, which is about two young Black girls who move to a new town that is predominantly white, and they learn about the racial history of the town while living there. It just came out this year, so it's brand new. Blended by Sharon M. Draper is a book about a biracial child, and in the book, just a small part of it, she and her stepbrother are pulled over by police, and she has to deal with the trauma of that event. Finally, Ghost Boys by Jewel Parker Rhodes is a tragic story about a Black main character who is killed by a white police officer and sees the aftermath of his murder as a ghost. Both Blended and Ghost Boys deal heavily with trauma. My next group of books that I'm going to recommend are for teens. The first book is This Book is Anti-Racist by Tiffany Jewell, which is a step-by-step guide on how to work toward being anti-racist. The next is Stamped, adapted by Jason Reynolds and originally written by Ibram X. Kendi. This book details the history of racism and anti-racism in the United States. As Reynolds calls it, a not history book, which means that this book will teach you all about the history you might not learn in school or in the textbooks you're given. Say Her Name, edited by Zetta Elliott, is a poetry collection that looks at the hashtag Say Her Name campaign that began on Twitter, and features poems predominantly about the Black women who have died at the hands of police. You may have read this one, or you have to read it this summer, but we always recommend Ta-Nehisi Coates' Between the World and Me to really understand the dangers and oppression Black men face in America. Black Enough is a short story collection edited by E.B. Zaboy that includes all different stories and intersectional identities about the Black experience in America, and they're all by your favorite YA authors. Now, if you've read The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas, or if you haven't, you really should. I'm going to introduce you to some other YA books written either around the same time or after about police brutality. There is a wonderful TED Talk by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie called The Danger of a Single Story, and she talks about how we as a society tend to keep one book about a subject on a pedestal. So The Hate You Give is currently on that pedestal. But that's not fair to that experience, because no one experiences the same event in the same way. No one experiences living their identity in the same way. Therefore, we need books that show a spectrum of ideas, a spectrum of experiences and perspectives about these subjects, because truthfully, we can always learn more. So here are some titles for you to read. Dear Martin by Nick Stone. Tyler Johnson Was Here by J. Coles. Light It Up by Kekla Magoon. I Am Alfonso Jones by Tony Medina and illustrated by Stacey Robinson and John Jennings. That one's a graphic novel. All American Boys by Jason Reynolds and Brendan Keeley. And finally, I'm Not Dying With You Tonight by Gilly Siegel and Kimberly Jones. My final round of recommendations is for adults. Really, all the previous recommendations are also for adults, but this is a more targeted list. The first group of books are memoirs, because memoirs are so important to read because they show people's in-depth life experiences and perspectives, and you can read these to better understand someone and what they're going through. Like I said before, we should not fall into the trap of the danger of a single story, which is why I'm offering you different perspectives about kind of the same subjects, but not really, which is, again, shows a single story can't showcase the magnitude of Black lives or what I'm about to talk about, which is intersectionality. So Kimberly Crenshaw coined the term intersectionality, which is about when identities intersect. So some examples are Black women have intersecting identities between race and gender. They don't experience race in the same way that Black men do, and they don't experience gender in the same way that white women do. Black queer people have an intersecting identity between race and sexuality. Black trans people have an intersecting identity between race and gender. So memoirs are really important for intersectional identity, because a writer can really delve into and explore their multifaceted identity, because it's about their lives. The books are about their perspectives. It's about their experience. So here are some great recommendations. Eloquent Rage by Brittany Cooper. This Will Be My Undoing by Morgan Jerkins. I'm Still Here by Austin Channing Brown. How We Fight for Our Lives by Saeed Jones. All Boys Aren't Blue by George M. Johnson. 'Cause, The Life and Times of Michael A. by Danielle Allen. And finally, we have a memoir from the creators of the Black Lives Matter movement, the women who coined the phrase, which I truly cannot recommend enough if you want to hear from the women themselves who have created a voice for the movement. And the book is When They Call You a Terrorist by Patrice Kahn Colors and Asha Bandali. So this last round are more nonfiction books that will help you better understand your place in discussions about race and privilege and the history that either benefits you or causes you harm. So these books are White Fragility by Robyn DiAngelo. So You Want to Talk About Race by Ijoma Oluo. Waking Up White and Finding Myself in the Story of Race by Debbie Irving. And Tears We Cannot Stop, A Sermon to White America by Michael Eric Dyson. So these are all books that white Americans, including myself, should read. These books examine what white people have done, can do, and should do for Black America. If you're ready to examine where you stand in terms of race, and you're ready to have uncomfortable conversations, please, please, please read these books. How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram X. Kendi is the next step to take after examining privilege, because as Angela Davis states, quote, "In a racist society, it is not enough to be non-racist. We must be anti-racist," unquote. Kendi's book can help you on your anti-racism journey. The next book I'm going to recommend is Citizen by Claudia Rankine, which is a book that looks at the symbolism and stereotypes that plague Black America in the 21st century. One part that really struck out to me when I read it is the section about Serena Williams and how she was treated by judges and by competitors, and then Rankine juxtaposes that with how her competitors were treated. Finally, I'm going to recommend, I have said finally a lot during this video, but truly finally, I'm going to recommend some books that maybe need some background in history or who want to learn more of how we got to where we are today. These books look at the racist history of the United States and how the government upheld laws to institutionalize racism. The books I'm going to recommend are Stamped from the Beginning, The Definitive History of Racist Ideas in America by Ibram X. Kendi, which is the original version of the Jason Reynolds one that I mentioned in the young adults. The Color of Law, A Forgotten History of How Our Country Segregated America by Richard Rothstein. And The New Jim Crow, Mass Incarceration in the Age of Colorblindness by Michelle Alexander. We will post the books I've talked about at some point later today, if you want a reminder of what was discussed. Again, I hope you find at least one book on this list to help you in your journey. If you want more recommendations or if you have any questions, you can always email us. We'll always answer. I just want to remind you that this list was in no way as comprehensive as it could be. I had to make the video less than 20 minutes, so I could talk about books all day, but this video is only 15 minutes. So please email us if you want more recommendations, but also email us if you have recommendations for us to buy. We're always looking for more recommendations. Thank you very much for listening today.